Hi, my name's Duncan from SSW and I'm at NDC today for SSW TV doing the Ask Me Anything sessions, and today we have John Bristowe from Progress. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. So maybe John, you can introduce yourself and say where you're from and,
sure.
and what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I'm living here in Australia in the sunny Gold Coast, and I get around Australia quite a bit, so we're down here in Sydney. I'm part of the developer relations team at Progress. Some of you might also know Telerik. We were acquired recently, so that's why we're part of the big family now.
Yeah.
And so it's my job to go around and talk to developers about some of our tooling, talk about some of the problems they have, try and answer some of their questions, things like that. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So I just got a chance to see your talk here at NDC, talking about JavaScript and the mobile environment. Do you want to give us a quick summary of what your talk was about?
Yeah, I did a State of the Union sort of address of what the realities you face if you're going to do mobile development with JavaScript. We didn't talk about Xamarin or anything like that, but we were just saying, like, look, you're a JavaScript developer or you're a mobile guy and you want to target using JavaScript. What are the realities? And so we talked about we talked a little bit about the history, talked a little bit about your options, talked about things like progressive web, what Google's pushing, talked a little bit about hybrid and the traditional story there with Cordova, frameworks like Ionic, for example. And then I proposed, and maybe there's another way to do this aside from going full native, which is what we call hybrid native. And the idea there is rather than leveraging a web view, which has kind of been the bane of our existence in the hybrid space, like it's one of those, we have to use it because it's there. That's the only way we can kind of hook in. Why don't we get rid of the web view and rather, instead of leveraging HTML, why don't we leverage the native sort of constructs that are available on the phone, like the native UI or the native sort of APIs that are available on iOS, Android, etc.
Yeah. So how long has NativeScript been around?
We've been out for probably about 18 months, I think. It's not too long. Like the reason why, I'll tell you why. Like new frameworks like React Native and NativeScript have only come about recently because of innovations that have been done in the VMs of JavaScript, the JavaScript VMs on iOS and Android. Until recently, there wasn't really hooks into driving into the native APIs on the platform themselves. So we needed that there was a glimmer of light that was introduced by the VMs, and this was done with JavaScript Core on iOS. There wasn't an API available until recently to actually invoke native APIs directly via JavaScript. And once that came about, it was like, aha, we can leverage that and then build all this stuff on top. And so that's why that's only been occurring recently. I think since iOS 8, that's been available. So it's been really recent. So,
correct me if I'm wrong or add to this, the main benefit is you're going to get better performance because you're running closer to being native than versus being a not traditional hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, I make this claim that hybrid's great, you can leverage existing skills, but there have been some problems that have been encountered. Facebook famously, got rid of it. That's part of why React and React Native came about, was because they still wanted to target JavaScript and HTML, but they didn't have the tool sets or frameworks available to do that. And so, anyways, so. With hybrid, you're targeting WebView, and people can, write crappy apps on that as well. They can get jank on their UI, and there's a perception that hybrid is slow. To a certain extent, it can be. In some cases, I mean, I've used perfectly fine hybrid apps. There's some great examples out there that you could cite. One of my favorite ones is there's a drinking app that I use. Which is like you check in, it's like Foursquare check-ins for beer drinking. And it's a great app, it works really well, but the classic sort of example is like, we've written this with hybrid, we've targeted WebView, it's great, but it's slow or whatever. And so with hybrid native, you can actually target, still targeting JavaScript, getting the best of that, but at the same time just going like against the native APIs itself, so you get a real benefit there in terms of perf.
So what's the development story like? So, every time I move towards that space, I see like I've got to have this huge tool chain, and then I've got to try and get it on the App Store. So what does NativeScript have in a development sense for helping being able to, smooth that transition from I've written my app to I want to show it to someone and I want to get it on the store?
Yeah, so we recognize that people are going to use different tools. So we have extension and template support within Visual Studio proper. So not Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio, the big one. Visual Studio Code we have integration with, so we have a debug profile for Visual Studio Code.
Cool.
People have written templates involved in that. There's statement completion. Like we have these. There's all kinds of extensions that you can do with Visual Studio Code that we've got either from us or the community. There's integration points with Sublime Text. There's integration points with all kinds of editors out there. And then there's the CLI itself, which everything targets ultimately. And with that, you can do things like builds, you can do provisioning, you can do signing, you can do generate for me, the app package, all that stuff and everything in between, including integrating with plugins. We have support for things like CocoaPods. We have support for things like being able to pull in, a jar file if you want to target Android and there's a library that you're using that's written in Java and you want to bring that in. We have Gradle-based builds. We have integration with Xcode, CLI tooling. So we've done a really good job, I think, of making sure that CLI-based development process is really good. Now that, to your question, you still need a lot of that tooling. So unfortunately, if you're going to generate an IPA, you can do so remotely. There are many services, including from Telerik, services where you can send us assets and we'll build remotely in the cloud and we'll send you down whatever app package you want. But the reality is most people are going to do local development. And so for that end, you need tooling. And so things like Xcode, things like, Genymotion for VM support or, Gradle integration, you're going to have to install a lot of that stuff. Yeah. So it's still a reality today. We haven't gotten to that point where it's actually really, really seamless. I think Xamarin's actually done a really good job with tooling, to be honest.
Okay.
But we are definitely there in terms of NativeScript, I think. We're doing a really good job there.
So one last question for you. Where do you think will be like this new wave of doing hybrid, where you're kind of hybrid native and you're getting better performance? In 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, does that mean that we're going to not see this traditional hybrid now? We're running on PhoneGap and everyone will be doing native hybrid?
I think Brian LaRue, who's one of the creators of PhoneGap's mission, which is we built PhoneGap so that it didn't have to exist, I think that will come to fruition at some point. Either the browser vendors themselves will get their act together and make their mobile browsers fully sort of spec compliant on every API you could possibly want in a secure manner. And we will have this sort of progressive web app stream realized by Google. That one is a bit of a stretch because we've been doing that for forever and it still hasn't come to fruition. Or I think the trend will just move towards this sort of hybrid native approach where web views are slow and we need a better approach. And certainly we think that ourselves on the NativeScript side and others are trying to target that. Incidentally, if you want to find out more about NativeScript, you can go to nativescript.org. That's my shameless plug there.
Cool. No, go for it. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. So we've got resources there. We've got white papers. We've got quick starts. You can grab all the tools, all open source. Projects up on GitHub, github.com/NativeScript. And go nuts. Let us know what you think. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for your talk at NDC.
All right, cheers.
Hey everybody, it's me, Scott Hanselman, here with Adam Kogan at NDC Sydney. We're hanging out. It's SSW Video. How are you, sir? That's how you do an intro. No, go ahead. I'll be right here, please.